Power can be, and at no distant date will be, transmitted without wires for all commercial uses, such as the lighting of homes and the driving of airplanes. I have discovered the essential principles, and it only remains to develop them commercially.
When we were, both of us, when we were kids, we got interested in ham radio and the magic of ham radio. I mean, here was an amazing thing. We built crystal sets, you know, back probably when I was about the third grade or so. I've still got it someplace packed away here. And you know, pound a stake in the ground and run some wire up in the trees and crystal set with a pair of earphones and move the slider back and forth on the coil, and wow, we could hear voices coming in out of nowhere, you know. We lived on a farm and we didn't have a lot of money, so you made stuff out of what you had. I made ham radio antennas out of half-inch and three-quarter inch galvanized pipe. Back then we thought, well, how do radios work? They work because you plug the wire in the outlet and you can hear them. So it must be coming in on the outlet. No. This was magic. It was coming in out of thin air. And that magic of RF, I think, has never grown old.
The desire that guides me in all I do is the desire to harness the forces of nature to the service of mankind.
Realizing Tesla's dream. Everyone that I talk to, they go, oh man, you know, you're going to make it. And I tell them, yes, we will. And I think, you know, my belief is that in the coming years, we are going to be, the people in this room are going to be the ones that realize the dream of a wireless grid that safely transports electricity globally. So what you guys have done is so amazing to me. And everyone that I talk to is super excited about it, but they all have this one question. Is it safe? So could you answer that question for us?
Well, there's a couple of things that you have to realize, and that is power density and also the frequency that we're operating at. Now, when it comes to power density, if you take all the energy that hits the Earth from the sun and you add that up, how close are we to that? You know, just daylight on the daylight side of the planet. We're going to be minuscule. To power the entire planet for every person on the surface of the Earth, we're going to have a minuscule amount compared to what the sun actually delivers. When we start pumping energy around the planet, okay, and we're talking about frequencies like 400 hertz, okay, or lower, 60 hertz, or even lower than that. We can operate in all those regions, extremely low frequencies. Stop and think how big a wavelength is. A wavelength at those frequencies, you're talking halfway to the moon, okay? So all of a sudden, you know, the Himalayas become flat. The entire surface of the planet becomes smooth, a smooth surface. Tesla said, you know, it's as though the planet itself, he wrote this, I think, in 1906 or 7. It's as though the planet itself was designed with this in mind, you know. The Earth was made for this. I became more handy with the tools than he was, so he stuck in the library and told me what needed to be built, and I would go out and figure out a way to construct it. And then we get into all of the stuff that Tesla did. In the electrical engineering library, came across a book that Tesla himself wrote, and it was a set of lectures that he gave, and but in it there was a chapter on wireless power and his experiments at Colorado Springs in 1899. It was sort of like he's talking about ball lightning and this stuff, and it was if he did all this back then, how come we're not doing it today? And of course, Tesla's very famous for the work that he did on
two-phase or polyphase electric power and the development of electrical machinery, and what resulted in Niagara Falls in the 1890s. Anyway, I sent Kenny some of that stuff, and the next thing I knew, Kenny was building Tesla coils.
We had built Tesla coils prior to that with ham radio. We found out that you could take your transmitter, feed it into the base of a coil, and get a large voltage out of this thing. You know, you're putting in a few watts, but you're getting these big sparks coming out of this coil. That got us to the point where we were building coils the way, you know, you go to Scientific American and see how they describe to build it. You build it and it works. I don't know how many circuits that I built where they were basically making the capacitive impedance equal to the inductive impedance. And that's where that whole formula comes from. You know, 1 over 2 pi equals the square root of LC that everybody uses. You see that in every paper almost about Tesla. Well, what happens when it takes time? The energy takes time to propagate down this long coil that we call a Tesla coil. And that's when we got into this. You know, well, what does it mean it takes time? These were the questions I was asking.
We discovered something that a lot of people didn't seem to understand about Tesla coils. And that was that the voltage distribution on them, they're not simple tuned LC networks. And when we saw that, all of a sudden we began to make considerable breakthroughs.
And from that, the first one we built, it matched Tesla's data from his 1899 library notebook.
We had the luxury, since we were funding it out of our own pockets, to build stuff and fail and fail and fail. But each time you'd learn something new, and all of a sudden we were making ball lightning at one point.
So if you do what Tesla says that he did, you will see what Tesla said he saw.
It is a mere question of time when man will succeed in attaching their machinery to the very real work of nature.
The exciter itself, this legendary tower that was at Wardenclyffe and then got taken down and then appeared magically in Texas. Why the shape, and why is it so big?
Let's go back to Colorado Springs, the original laboratory that Tesla had. You've got to realize that there at Colorado Springs, 2.5 years prior to that, Tesla was giving the commemoration speech in Buffalo for the Niagara Falls power plant that was just completed. And everybody's saying, wow, what a marvelous thing. We got these wires now that run from Niagara to Buffalo, and we have electricity. And in his commemoration speech, he says, my fondest dream is to have energy without wires. And everybody's jaw dropped and said, what? We just built all this for nothing? No, that was a stepping stone. And 2.5 years later, we find him at Colorado Springs. At Colorado Springs, he builds this big laboratory. Why was it so big? Well, he was dealing with fields, electric fields, okay, of extremely high voltages, and he was experimenting. He didn't know how it worked. He used intuition to develop what he had. And he found something that worked. And he found that the higher the charge was on an elevated capacitor, the more energy he could propagate. Okay, the more energy he could couple into the system. So when he went back to Long Island, he said, okay, I know exactly what to do. I need to make a device that gives me a lot of charge. Well, what's charge? Charge is basically the voltage times the capacitance, the size of the ball, the metal ball. So I can either raise the voltage or I can make a bigger ball. And that's what he did at Long Island. He developed something that would do both, raise the voltage even higher than what he had at Colorado, and a bigger ball, in other words, more capacitance, which meant more charge, which meant he could now send out more energy for the masses to use at that point.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the Xenic solution, unlike radiation from an antenna, where you want to run more and more power in order to increase field strength, with the Xenic wave, the field strength is directly proportional to the amount of elevated charge. So that's why we've got a big ball up there, because we need to put a lot of charge up there. No, you can fast forward over the years, and the next thing I know, Kenny is in Belgrade, sitting down with Alexander Mrencic, who was the professor in the electrical engineering department at Belgrade, and he was the director of the Tesla Museum.
And we came in, with all these scientific papers and said, look, this is what the problem we're working on. Do you have any of Tesla's information pertaining to this around these dates? And they would go dig in the archives, and eventually we had complete run of the archives.
Yeah, they were completely open to us. Dr. Mrencic says, the archives are here. Anything you want. Is there anything we can show you? Yeah. And
so we went through all the photographs, and the museum is famous for saying, oh, we have over 200,000 documents of Tesla. Well, I think we've seen them all.
Now, they had insight that we didn't have. Dr. Mrencic was the first one to tell me, look, this propagation that if it's going on here, these aren't ordinary radiations. This is not the kind of field you'd get from an antenna, obviously, because it's too small to be an antenna at these frequencies. He said, but it appears that he's setting up surface waves. And it took us, probably about 6 or 8 years to finally say, wait a minute now. Mrencic gave us a hint that it's probably surface waves. And that's when we begin to say, no, not ordinary surface waves. These are xenic waves. But as we began to chase that, it took us about 10 years of experiments, but we didn't stop. We just kept plugging away, doing the experiments over and over in different ways. And
the real work is not getting the high voltage, but getting the correct fields around the Tesla coil with the correct magnitudes and phases. That's the critical piece. You don't go after the big sparks, you go after the proper tuning. And now you'll launch a xenic surface wave. And as you go lower and lower in frequency, the wave will begin to propagate further and further until you get what Tesla said, you get below 10 kilohertz, and now you've got global propagation. So really, it's not any lightning bolt of revelation. It's just a series of questions as you travel along whatever the path is in front of you.
And then 2013 or 14, we were getting consistently good results over and over again. We could get them out 20, 25, 30 miles over the mountains and everything up in New Hampshire. It isn't that we discovered all this stuff. Here's what's going on, and I guess this happened to the Wright brothers. In fact, I forget whether it was Wilbur or Orville that wrote, it's almost as though this was saved from all those other people. It was saved for us to rediscover. Yeah.
If I were ever assailed by doubt of ultimate success, I would dismiss it by remembering the words of that great philosopher, Lord Kelvin, who, after witnessing some of my experiments, said to me with tears in his eyes, I am sure you will do it.
Many people are asking today, what's the Corum theory doing? Is the Corum theory borrowing Tesla entirely? Are you using all of Tesla's patents to create the Corum technology?
Our approach was, look, if you were going to do it and all you had was what's in the library for conventional science, engineering, electrical engineering, is there something there that would explain what he did? And after a lot of head banging and stuff, eventually the dawn would break, and it was sort of like, oh yeah, I bet if you did this. And when we set up the apparatus and do it, and in his diary, when you're reproducing what's in the diary, you'd say, he could have done this or he could have done that. What was he doing right there? And if you fiddle with it long enough, it's sort of like, that's what he was doing. You do the experiment, yes, you get that result. So I think the problem is there are a lot of people that could have, look, we're about as dumb as you get, just a couple of old New England farm boys, but we didn't give up, all right? And the thing is, we were just inspired by what he had done. And anybody could have done this. There's no magic here. You know, somebody said, "How come you could see so far?" And he says, "Well, because I stood on the shoulder of giants." You know, but really, that's how we got to here. It was all of this stuff is in books. It's already there. It's just use it to understand what Tesla was doing.
Yeah, our patents aren't really copies of Tesla. We didn't copy him. We picked up where his thread left off. And that's what we developed. And we turned it into modern engineering where modern scientists could now go back, look at Tesla, and make the connection to modern day engineering. And that's where our patents come into play. Our patents are really a continuation of Tesla's. He patented up to a certain point, and then we patent from that point forward.
We have the luxury of being able to do this in retrospect, you know? And, you know, it's sort of like having looked over the master's shoulder, and when the master was out of the lab, we could go in and tinker with it. And so we were able to make that step a little bit further, but he was already there.
Tesla, when people ask him about his goal and so on, basically in so many words he stated, my idea of the polyphase electric system was to remove toil from the human race. Because now we have electric motors. Before, a carpenter would use a handsaw, and that's all they had. Now they can use a skill saw of some sort or some other electric device to reduce the amount of work that a human being has to do. And that's really what this is. It's there to reduce the toil and the heartache involved with going forward as a civilization.
There's nothing that can hold it back. It's going to happen.
His work is like that of a planter for the future. His duty is to lay foundation of those who are to come and point the way.
Does the science work? Does the technology work? And at this point, we've seen it work. We know it works. Over and over and over again.
What we did is something that anybody else in the world could have done if they had taken Tesla serious.
The process really has been a series of just asking questions.
What we're talking about here is to be able to deliver electrical energy to anybody on the planet, anywhere, at any time.
So when you talk about a person that's 6 feet tall, well, the absorption is going to be minuscule.
The wonderful thing about science is if you do these things, you will get these results every time.
The human body is not designed to receive RF, so we're going to be invisible.
We are probably the luckiest guys on the planet to be able to be alive at this point in time when Tesla brought it to here, and here's where we are, and we just kind of connected the two together.